Wes Craven's first feature film came out swinging, and it instantly built his reputation as someone who didn't shy away from brutality. The Last House on the Left tells the grim tale of two teenage girls who head into the city for a concert. Their trip ends when they fall into the hands of a gang of criminals. What unfolds is relentless violence, abduction, and humiliation, shown with a harshness that shocked audiences at the time. The film didn't look polished, and that worked in its favor. The grainy, unrefined style gave it the aura of something you weren't supposed to watch, almost like forbidden footage. That sense of realism cut deep, and it's one reason this movie has been remembered for decades. Censorship was a huge problem. Many theaters refused to show it, others demanded cuts, and in some countries it was banned outright. But the controversy only made it more notorious. People passed around stories about how extreme it was, which fueled its underground popularity. What made The Last House on the Left so unsettling wasn't just the cruelty of the criminals. It was also the way the victims' parents responded once they discovered what happened. They went from grieving to carrying out violent revenge, which blurred the lines between justice and savagery. The story focuses on the Carter family, a middle-class clan who take a road trip and end up stranded in the Nevada desert. What they don't know is that a family of cannibalistic outcasts lives nearby, watching and waiting. The setup seems straightforward, a wholesome suburban family up against wild killers. But the film flips expectations. The longer the struggle goes on, the more the Carters themselves become savage. The parents and children are pushed to brutal acts in order to survive. The desert setting, empty and endless, makes it worse. There's no one to call, no help coming, only sand and silence. One of the most memorable elements is the look of the mutant family. Michael Berryman, with his unique features, became the chilling face of the film's promotional posters. Audiences were drawn in by his appearance alone, and the performances made the antagonists feel both monstrous and strangely human. This wasn't just a gore fest. Craven built tension with long silences, sudden bursts of violence, and the horrifying idea that being civilized is only skin deep. The movie raised eyebrows with its commentary on class, isolation, and family values turned upside down. Shocker is one of Craven's most eccentric creations. The story follows Horace Pinker, a sadistic TV repairman who turns out to be a serial killer. After a spree of murders, he's finally caught and sentenced to death. But during his execution, Pinker makes a deal with dark forces, allowing him to return from the dead in bizarre ways, by traveling through electricity, televisions, and even possessing other people's bodies. The result is part slasher, part supernatural, part satire. It has gruesome kills, surreal effects, and an energy that makes it feel like Craven was deliberately pushing the boundaries of absurdity. Audiences at the time were divided. Some found it messy, others found it wildly entertaining. But even critics who weren't impressed admitted it had ambition. The way Pinker jumps through TV screens and electrical systems gave it a chaotic, cartoonish quality, almost predicting how horror and technology would merge in later decades. Craven originally hoped Shocker would launch another franchise like Elm Street, but box office numbers didn't meet expectations. Still, it has since gained cult status for its over-the-top kills and Mitch Pileggi's intense performance as Pinker. Instead of keeping horror in one neighborhood or house, he let it spill into media, electricity, and technology. Even though it didn't explode like his other hits, it reflects his constant drive to try new ideas. The film begins with a boy known as Fool, who lives in poverty with his sick mother. Desperate for money, he joins two burglars planning to rob their landlords, the Robisons. Instead of easy cash, Fool finds himself trapped in a sprawling, twisted mansion full of secrets. The Robesons aren't just landlords. They're sadistic figures who keep kidnapped children locked away in the basement. These people under the stairs are disfigured, silent, and terrifying, representing years of abuse. Fool has to navigate hidden corridors, vicious guard dogs, and booby traps while trying to escape. This wasn't a typical haunted house movie. It combined urban struggles, class commentary, and fairy tale-style villains into a grotesque but oddly comedic tale. Some critics even compared it to Home Alone if it had been made for adults with a mean streak. The production design stands out. The Robesons' house is practically a character itself, filled with trapped doors, shifting walls, and endless hidden spaces. The bizarre couple at the center, played by Everett McGill and Wendy Roby, turned in performances that were equal parts over the top and disturbing. If one movie secured Wes Craven's spot in horror history forever, it's A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is where Freddy Krueger came alive, an icon who became one of the most recognizable villains in all of horror. The plot is simple, but genius. Teenagers in a suburban neighborhood start dying in their sleep. The killer is Freddy, a burned man with knives for fingers, who can only attack you in your dreams. Fall asleep and you're his prey. Stay awake and you slowly lose your mind. That core idea, being killed in your dreams, tapped into something primal. Everyone sleeps, everyone dreams, and no one can escape it forever. The movie mixed psychological horror with slasher violence in a way that felt fresh and terrifying. Heather Langenkamp's Nancy became the strong, resourceful protagonist, while Robert Englund's Freddy stole the show with his twisted humor and menacing presence. Unlike the silent killers of the time like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees, Freddy talked, mocked, and toyed with his victims, which made him even scarier. On a technical level, the film impressed too. Craven used clever practical effects to blur the line between dream and reality. Freddy's glove emerging from a bathtub, a victim being dragged up walls, a bed spitting out a fountain of blood. These moments have stuck in horror memory for decades. The success of A Nightmare on Elm Street launched a massive franchise. Sequels, a TV show, comic books, crossovers, and a remake. Craven himself only returned to direct the 7th film, New Nightmare, but the original remains untouchable. With The Serpent and the Rainbow, Craven stepped away from suburban America and into the mysticism of Haiti. Based loosely on Wade Davis's nonfiction book, the film explored voodoo, politics, and the fine line between science and superstition. Bill Pullman stars as Dr. Dennis Allen, an anthropologist sent to Haiti to investigate a mysterious powder that supposedly turns people into zombies. The locals tell him stories of men who died and were later seen walking around again. What begins as a scientific quest slowly turns into a nightmare involving secret societies, ritual practices, and political unrest. The movie stands out for its atmosphere. Real Haitian locations and mixed horror imagery was used with cultural details that most audiences in the 1980s had never seen before. It wasn't about flesh-eating zombies. It was about people chemically and spiritually trapped in a state between life and death. The tone is more mystical and eerie than gory, though there are bursts of surreal horror. Coffin claustrophobia, visions of corpses, and dreamlike sequences where the line between reality and hallucination breaks down. By the early 90s, the Elm Street franchise had expanded far beyond Craven's original vision. Sequels turned Freddy Krueger into a wisecracking anti-hero, and the series leaned more towards spectacle than terror. Then he returned with New Nightmare, which reimagined Freddy in a meta, reality-bending way. The plot follows Heather Langenkamp, the actress who played Nancy in the original film. Here, she plays herself. She starts noticing strange events in her real life that mirror the Elm Street films. A darker, more sinister version of Freddy seems to be leaking out of fiction and into the real world. This was bold for its time. The movie blurred the line between actors, characters, and audiences, years before meta-horror became trendy. Cast members played themselves. Wes Craven even appeared on screen, and Freddy returned as a more primal figure. The scares were sharp too. The redesign of Freddy gave him a more demonic edge, removing the campy humor of later sequels. Scenes like the hospital encounter or the giant Freddy claw emerging through the sheets reminded viewers that this villain could still terrify. If Elm Street put Craven on the horror map, Scream reinvented the map altogether. Released in 1996, it became a phenomenon, reshaping slasher films for a new generation. The setup: a masked killer called Ghostface begins targeting high school students in the town of Woodsboro. The story follows Sidney Prescott, who is grieving her mother's death while facing harassment and attacks. The killer taunts victims with phone calls, often opening with a chilling question: "What's your favorite scary movie?" What made Scream stand out wasn't just the kills. It was the way the characters were aware of horror rules. They talked about cliches, mentioned classic films, and openly dissected tropes. Yet despite the self-awareness, the murders still landed with full force. The opening scene with Drew Barrymore is legendary. What begins as playful phone banter quickly turns into a vicious attack, shocking audiences by killing off the apparent star within minutes. That moment set the tone. No one was safe. The cast, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and Skeet Ulrich, helped create characters who were memorable beyond being victims. The film balanced humor, tension, and brutality in a way that felt completely fresh at the time. The success of Scream revived slasher films, which had been fading by the mid-90s. It also launched a franchise of sequels, TV series, and countless imitators. Deadly Blessing, one of Craven's early works that tends to get overlooked. The story is set in a rural community dominated by the Hittites, a religious group that rejects modern society. When a man who left the sect dies mysteriously, his widow Martha is left to face the hostility of the community and a wave of strange events. The film mixes slasher beats with religious paranoia and supernatural undertones. There are scenes of snakes invading bathtubs, sinister whispers, and shadowy figures, creating a thick atmosphere of dread. While it didn't make the same impact as Elm Street or The Hills Have Eyes, it showed Craven experimenting with blending psychological unease, spiritual themes, and small-town suspicion. Fans who revisit it today often find it an underrated gem with some of his creepiest imagery. This wasn't a supernatural slasher. It was a tight, suspense-driven thriller. Rachel McAdams plays Lisa Reisert, a hotel manager who boards a red-eye flight after attending her grandmother's funeral. She sits next to a seemingly charming man, played by Cillian Murphy. Midway through the flight, his charm drops, and she realizes she's been trapped by a terrorist plot. The film runs on pure tension. The confined airplane setting adds claustrophobia, and the back and forth between McAdams and Murphy becomes a psychological chess match. Murphy's piercing stare and sudden bursts of menace made him a standout villain. What impressed audiences was the pacing. The film starts like a romantic comedy, shifts into a thriller, and ends as a full-on action sequence. Craven handled all those shifts seamlessly, proving he could do more than supernatural horror. That same year, Craven teamed up again with Kevin Williamson, the screenwriter of Scream, to make Cursed. This time, the focus was on werewolves. Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg play siblings who are bitten by a creature after a car accident. Soon, they begin showing signs of transformation and realize they're part of a larger supernatural conflict. The movie had a notoriously troubled production. Originally set for release in 2003, it was delayed for years due to reshoots, edits, and battles over whether it should be rated R or PG-13. Several actors who filmed scenes ended up cut from the final product. The end result is uneven, but still interesting. Some effects feel dated, yet Ricci and Eisenberg bring energy to their roles. Over time, fans of quirky horror have given it cult status. And that wraps up our deep dive into the best Wes Craven horror movies. Whether it's A Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, or his earlier cult classics, Craven's legacy continues to shape the genre in unforgettable ways. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more horror deep dives, and ring the bell so you never miss a scare. Which Wes Craven film is your favorite, and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what creeped you out the most.